folks, how are you doing? So if you've followed the channel for more than a couple of videos, you'd have realized by now that I do have a fondness for instruments in general, but the oddball instruments in particular. This channel was built entirely around the idea of using a banjo and the mandolin and a few more instruments to cover tunes like the Mega Man series or Turrican or any other tune you can think of, really, in rather unusual ways. I've always expressed that I had no interest in using a banjo to cover a banjo tune because to me it would be pointless. What actually interests me is using instruments in unusual fashions. And my love for these instruments doesn't stop at the ones I use on the video. In fact, I've amassed quite the collection of instruments over the years, and they're all sitting here around me. If I look around the room here, I can see quite a lot of instruments that I look at every day and think, man, it would be great to use that for a cover at some point. Unfortunately, either they're out of tune or they're missing parts or they just don't sound great in general. And I just quite wouldn't be able to pull off a nice tune or put a cover together with just those instruments. I'm talking about stuff like flutes and stringed instruments. For instance, I have these old wooden flutes, bamboo flutes, and they're the types you'll find at most car boot sales or flea markets, whatever you call them, swap meets. And these things aren't in tune. They're not in a specific key, really. And very often they're just ornaments, purely decorative pieces. But I just pick them up regardless, usually for $1 or $2. And they just sit here looking cool, but not being usable. And over the years, I've always thought I'd love to be able to use them in some fashion, especially now that I've started streaming on Twitch and composing stuff live on Twitch. These would actually be very handy if I could use them in a consistent manner. So I decided to turn them, or to try my hand at turning them into sample libraries, virtual instruments, if you will, using something like Contact or others. There are others, but Contact is very handy for that. So I'm going to try and see if I can sample these guys and see if we can use them as an instrument. All right, let's get started. You'll forgive the window here. This room is tiny and I'm very, very limited as to what angles I can film from. And having a big window here normally prevents me from shooting from this angle. But the sun isn't shining straight today, so I think we should be okay. Let me fire up Ableton Live, which is the DAW I use nowadays. And what we're going to do is record these two flutes. They're two bamboo flutes, and they have somewhat the same tone. This one is blown like a silver flute across. This one has a whistle, so we might use them, and they're somewhat in the same key. So we might use them and see if we can get different tones, different breathing, and I'll explain why. So what I'm going to try and do is record maybe 2 or 3 samples, something long, something short, something a bit more aggressive. I have all my recordings sorted now. I recorded 3 tracks, 3 versions of each note. I have a short one here, I have a soft one here, and I have a much louder, harsher version of it here. They're probably a bit similar. I might redo them at some point, but for now this is just a proof of concept. The other thing I've done is I've used Melodyne to tune them, tune each sample so they're actually in pitch. That's really important. You don't want something that is slightly off tune, because after a while and so many plays and repeats, that's all you're going to hear. So make sure everything is as close to in pitch as you can when you record, and then just fine tune it with a tool like Melodyne is really handy for that kind of stuff. So these were the notes available to me on that flute. Here I can hear there's a little trailing sound noise at the end. It's okay for now. I'm just going to leave it as is. I will go over and refine the samples as I go. So all we have to do is just add a new track and load up our Contact player. So right now I think I've Contact 611. So things aren't forward compatible, so you'll need at least contact 6.11 to play these libraries. I could actually redo the entire thing with a lower version of contact. I might do that at some point just to make sure that it's at least compatible with contact 5. So here's contact player loaded up. Let's create a new instrument, and we're going to go straight into editing it and to the mapping editor. I've all my samples here, so I think F4 is the lowest one I have. Make sure you align it with that note. You can actually make them a bit longer afterwards, but here it is. I have this sample, and if I press, what I can do as well is just extend it to the sharp, because I didn't record any of the sharp or flat notes, and if we press F4 and F sharp, it's going to use the same sample and retune it. What we could technically do as well is just, you know, have a whole range of notes you can use, but it's going to get out of sample quality really quickly, and you really don't want to do that. The reason we sampled all these notes is that we could actually just align them properly like that. We have G4 here, so it takes a while, and then so I'm going to do that for all these notes. I'm going to do a few here just to show you, and now if I press F, G, A, I got 3 notes that are played differently, and it sounds, you know, a lot better. I have nothing mapped for the other notes. I'm going to map everything on this and get back to you after a few minutes. It's going to be a tedious process. It takes a while. It's simple, but just it takes a while. So give me 5 minutes, or more like half an hour. While I'm recording stuff here, folks, I'm going to stay recording and record or sample this guy as well. This was... what was it? I think it was an old banjo ukulele that was given to me by a friend of mine. He gave me a few drums and percussions as well that you have seen on the channel, actually. Some of the kalimbas and wooden percussions that you might have seen in... I think I used them for the Turrican covers and the Dune covers a good bit. Anyway, he gave me this guy. It was a banjo ukulele. There's only 4 strings on this. Mind you, a banjo would have, but it's ukulele size. But the skin was busted, and the metal rim was broken as well. It was cracked, so it was unusable as an instrument, really. Sorry, it's here. And what I ended up doing is put just a wooden cover here and try to kind of make it somewhat presentable. I love this kind of rough kind of sanding of the varnish sort of look. And varnished it, you know, gloss varnished it, and used it as a decoration piece ever since. I made a new tailpiece for it and a new bridge. So it does make a sound, but it's not very... it's not really in tune, but it's been hanging on my wall ever since, and maybe this would be a good opportunity to sample it, retune it, and see if we can get an instrument out of it as well. So I'm going to do that. You've seen the process. It's very simple. It's just me recording one note after another painstakingly. So I'm going to do that while I'm still in the mood, and we'll make 2 instruments then for this video. Okay, let's go back. And there you go. So I've some form of mapping and overlapping done, so everything sounds just nice and smooth, and there's some transitions. I've used the lower notes, extended them a bit just because the sample allowed for it, and I've added some amount of effects, just a reverb and plate reverb, and I think there's a little bit of a delay. So this is what it sounds like. So what I've done is, when you play softly on your keyboard, if your keyboard allows it, to the one that's really abrupt and short at the end, when you press like really to the maximum pressure on your keyboard. So it allows for quite an amount of variety. And I've set the attack as well slightly, so it's not completely instant like it would with a flute. And I do like the way it sounds. And remember, these were just wooden bamboo flutes that weren't quite in tune, and now we have a... So we've quite a range of notes from, what is it, D2 to C5. And these are sort of the maximum notes I could stretch the last and first samples to, so it wouldn't sound too odd. But it allows for some cool chords. And let's do the same with the other instrument, the moon banjo, I called it, and I've actually done the work. I just got carried away and done the work already. Let me close this, and now these show up here in my. And this is the moon banjo. Oh, the other thing, the flutes, I call them the odd flutes. Because they're odd, but I've added some UI to it, and I started just playing around with the. Let me close this guy first. I started playing around with the attack. Yeah, I added an attack knob. So no attack or some attack. So the sound will fade in a lot more. Again, I'm just playing with these controls for now. And the moon banjo, this is what the moon banjo sounds like, with a beautiful picture on my kitchen table. I found out who this banjo belonged to. It was actually a friend of mine gave it to me, and he got it from a South African lady who moved to Ireland many years ago. And this was her banjo ukulele, or a banjoline, I think it's called. When she was playing in school. She got it in South Africa from her mother, who also was playing it in school. So I think this instrument, she was born, her mother was born in 1924, and I think this instrument, they believe that she started playing it when she was in her early teens, so 1934, something like that. What they don't know is who she got the instrument from. But that's where the trail ends. But it's at least from 1934, maybe earlier than that. Pretty cool, and it was cool to trace it to her. I did offer to give it back to her, but she said no. She's happy with what I've done with it, and it's immortalized now. But this is what it sounds like. So I've done quite a lot more here. I have 4 samples. Again, I think I will get rid of all that and actually have them as separate trigger keys, so you can trigger the samples. But right now they respond to how soft. How soft you press on the key. And you can see the pressure gauge just increase. But I think it sounds really cool. There you go, the moon banjo. So folks, this is going to be a work in progress for me. I just wanted to show you what I'm working on next. I'm always trying to find new ways to incorporate new instruments. So while this might not be in a cover, this will very much be in some compositions. So what's next for these instruments? So first, right now, I just want to send it to a couple of people that will try it for me. I know exactly who I want to send it to. There's 2 or 3 people that I can think of. So I'm going to do that, wait for their feedback, and see what the next step is here. All right, folks, a few days have passed, and I sent these 2 instruments for testing, reviewing, first impressions, whatever, to a couple of friends, or to a few friends, but 2 of them actually replied back and I had a chance to test it. So thank you very much, Zenibuka, and thank you, David Wise, no other than David Wise, who replied with a very, very helpful list of to-dos and suggestions, and great to have. One of which was something I already thought about, was to have key switches. So instead of having different sounds on different pressure velocities on your keyboard, just have key switches that you can switch on the fly if you want to change the type of sounds. You know, if it's a softer sound, short note, legato, or a longer or a harsher tone, more or less wind on the flute and that kind of stuff. With the banjo, the moon banjo, maybe having up and down strokes as a key switch, and just as well muted or not as a key switch. And also the other thing that would be cool to have is what's called round robins. So it's just having a different sound every time, or a different sample every time you press the key. So instead of just recording one note for one type of sound, you record 2, 3, 4, and then have a randomizer that actually decides randomly or sequentially which note to play so the instruments won't sound as mechanical. I think right now it sounds okay, but it won't sound as mechanical as it does now. It'll sound a bit more natural, and also the same note won't have exactly the same kind of timbre and tone that can be a problem when you're using that instrument in long, sections of a tune. You kind of go, well, I know that tune. I've heard it, or that note. I've heard it already. 2 seconds ago. It's the same note, same sample. So it'll avoid all that kind of stuff. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to add as well just options to turn off all the echo and delay, because people usually prefer the dry sound, and just going to have a custom delay in there. But what usually happens is people use it as dry as possible and then add their own effects afterwards. Anyway, folks, this is the end of part 1 of this little project. I want to say huge thank you to Zenibuka and David Weiss for your great feedback. Much, much appreciated. I appreciate the time you spent on these and your great feedback and detailed feedback. It's very helpful, sending me in the right direction of research as well and topics. So much appreciated. I will implement all that. I will finish those 2 instruments at some point early 2022. So hopefully early January, maybe even at the end of this year. And then my plan is to release more, sample a lot more of my instruments, my collection of wacky, weird stuff, and just release those as little contact libraries that people can download and play with. I want them to be usable, so not just kind of toy libraries, but I want them to actually be usable. So my goal with these is probably offer them on Patreon and YouTube members, and maybe have a page dedicated where people can just download them, for a couple of dollars. Literally, the goal is just to have people make music out of them and make these instruments live again. And hopefully it'll pay for my time as well. But there you go. So either Patreon or, a little download page somewhere. But stay tuned. I'm going to do more of these videos, document this a little bit better as well. And we'll have, hopefully in 2020, we'll have a whole collection of Banjo Gaiali instruments. Folks, thank you for watching. Have a great end of the year, and I'll see you next time.